We turn now to what was an extraordinary event in Washington. News cameras rolling as President Trump and a bipartisan group of lawmakers hashed out one of the major issues facing Congress at the moment: what to do about the so-called dreamers.
The press and everybody at home got a behind-the-scenes look at how bipartisan negotiations are playing out, sort of how the sausage is made. There were moments where it seemed a compromise could be easily achieved, with the president saying that he wanted a measure that would allow DACA recipients to stay here in the country.
I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital, because this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that. But it also has to be a bill where we're able to secure our border, and they're being requested by law enforcement officers. I had a big meeting with ICE last week. I had a big meeting with the Border Patrol agents last week. Nobody knows it better than them. As an example on the wall, they say, "Sir, we desperately need the wall."
Now, the wall appeared to be a big sticking point, with the president telling everyone in the room that there could be no deal without it. Democrats insisted that border security is a priority for them as well, but reminded the president of the thousands of people whose lives remain in the balance because of DACA.
We want a safe border in America, period. Both when it comes to the issues of illegal migration, but also when it comes to drugs and all these other areas. Now, I will say that there is a sense of urgency that's felt by many of us when it comes to this issue. There are many of these young people who are losing the protection of DACA on a daily basis. As of March 5th, 1,000 a day will lose DACA protection. 900 of them are members of the U.S. military. 20,000 of them are school teachers.
California Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein proposed a clean DACA fix followed by a comprehensive immigration measure. The president agreed before this happened.
I have no problem. I think that's basically what Dick is saying. We're going to come out with DACA. We're going to do DACA, and then we can start immediately on the phase 2, which would be comprehensive.
Would you be agreeable to that?
Yeah, I would like to do that. Go ahead. I think a lot of people would like to see that, but I think we have to do DACA first.
Mr. President, you need to be clear, though. I think what Senator Feinstein's asking here, when we talk about just DACA, we don't want to be back here 2 years later. You have to have security, as the Secretary would tell you.
But I think that's what she's saying.
I think she's saying something different.
It really was unbelievable to watch. CBS 4's Weijia Jiang is in Washington with more. And Weijia, how extraordinary was it that we got to see for an extended period of time, this went on and on, firsthand, what those closed-door negotiations actually look like?
You know, Rick, when pool cameras go in to cover these meetings, which happens a lot, it's called a spray. And that is exactly what it sounds like, a spray of the room, perhaps some remarks from the president if he offers them up. But that usually takes a few minutes. So to grant reporters and the press pool access for nearly 1 hour is extraordinary, because it not only allows us and the public to get an idea of what they talk about, how this unfolds, but it allows for real-time reaction of the president and what he has to say when he hears all these different ideas flying at him from Republicans and Democrats. So it was fascinating and surprising, and really gave a glimpse into where the negotiations stand right now.
And perhaps not coincidental that this kind of access comes on the heels of questions being raised in the book Fire and Fury and elsewhere that the president is unfit for the job. He certainly seemed to be in command of the meeting that took place today. He tweeted out that it was very productive. But what are the next steps in the negotiation process? How do lawmakers and the White House intend to resolve the issues of DACA and immigration reform?
Well, there is a lot ahead, but lawmakers here have agreed to focus on 4 issues as they continue their talks, including a visa lottery program, family immigration, DACA, and border security. And you kind of touched on it already, but the president has suggested that they first focus on DACA and border security and then turn to comprehensive immigration reform. But I'll tell you, after this meeting, there was confusion among the lawmakers themselves about what border security means and whether it has to include a physical wall or if it could be a wall of guards or of cameras. Of course, Republicans are adamant that it does mean a wall, although Democrats are combating that. So they will have to work that out. In fact, the press secretary could not definitively answer whether border security has to include a wall. Of course, President Trump has made clear that remains a priority for him.
All right, and finally tonight, Weijia, we learned just a couple of hours ago that Steve Bannon, the former chief strategist of the president, is out at Breitbart News, the conservative website, the far-right website that he had been running. Has there been any reaction from the White House or from lawmakers up on the Hill about this?
You know, this just happened a couple hours ago, and the White House has not officially responded. But I can tell you, last week, the press secretary said Breitbart should consider parting ways with Bannon. Of course, that follows the release of what is now probably the most famous book in America, Fire and Fury, Michael Wolff's take on the president and the administration, in which Bannon made explosive remarks about the president and his senior officials. After that, Bannon tried to backstep a little bit, try to make amends. But the deputy press secretary said there is no way back for Bannon here, and now he's out of a media job, too. We haven't heard from him since he was let go.
Fascinating turn of events. Weijia Jiang live for us at the White House. Weijia, thanks.